I'm thrilled and honored to be back here at One World. You have such a wonderful community here. So thank you for having me back. Thank you to Reverend Melanie. Thank you to the One World community. Thank you to whoever might tune in later on to the video. And thank you here for just giving me 20 minutes of your time. That's a big deal in my world, to give somebody 20 minutes of my time and attention. It's a huge deal in my world on a rainy Sunday morning when I could be cuddled up in my bed. So thank you very much for giving me that time. I'm going to do my best to really honor that and give you something to take home with you. I'm going to dive right in. If you want to know more about me, I love talking about myself. Just talk to me afterwards. I'll tell you all about myself. But let's dive into the message today, which is the improbably practical practice of compassion. The improbably practical practice of compassion. Why do we call it that? One, because it's fun to say. And two, because it's true. It's true that practicing compassion in our lives, the acts of compassion in our lives, it's improbably practical and improbably powerful. And we're going to get into why that is and how that is and how you can do more of it in your life. Okay? What I always seek to do in talks like this, and when I go to talks like this, what I'm looking for is I want somebody to help me see ways that I'm missing, that I have tools that I'm not using. Ways that I am hammering away at a nail with the palm of my hand and ignoring the hammer on my belt. You know what I mean? I like somebody to help go, hey, by the way, you got that, I mean, you can keep hammering if you want, but that might make it easier. And that's kind of my goal today in 20 minutes, just to plant some seeds and maybe direct your attention to some ways that you're whacking at things with the palm of your hand when you could be using a different tool on your belt. Compassion is defined as a feeling of deep sympathy and sorrow for another who is stricken by misfortune, accompanied by a strong desire to alleviate suffering. Okay, a feeling of deep sympathy and sorrow, got it, for somebody who's been stricken by misfortune, whether it's a mosquito bite or a hurricane, or a mosquito bite in a hurricane. Okay? Accompanied by a strong desire to alleviate suffering. All right, that's what it's all about. And I want to pause to say something. That is that as I forgot where she went, the lady offered up the prayer for people in Vegas. I'm aware what's happening in the world, and maybe you came here today, as did I, to connect with people, to maybe make a little sense out of things. It's been a really intense month, arguably a really intense year, and very confusing and can be disempowering when you're looking for some sense of reason in all this. While I'm not directly going to be talking about the tragedies that have impacted us the last month, everything I'm talking about is about that. It's about how we show up differently in our lives in this context. How can I show up more powerfully in my life? In the context of things are going to happen. As Gandhi said, at times like these, it's good to know there's always been times like these. So how can I show up better to them? So we're going to be touching on some of the events directly, but I wanted you to know, if you came here looking for some solace around those things, that's what this whole thing is going to be about. How to help you feel stronger and more empowered in your world, even as it's unpredictable. What I want to do is focus on what compassion is. We don't talk about compassion as a static thing. We talk about acts of compassion. You don't just compassion. You commit acts of compassion, right? That's how you practice compassion, is by acts of compassion. So we're going to talk about how, in the context of the spirituality at work, a double meaning I love so much. In the context of spirituality at work, I want to first kind of make the case for it. How your spirituality and your workplace, whether you're in a traditional workplace or just out in the world, because the world is our workplace, how those two areas, the key to success, how compassion is absolutely critical if you're going to be successful in your spirituality or in the workplace, and how both places are demanding it of you. I'm just going to establish that very briefly with a few quotes to kind of back me up, because I like when I read something that backs me up. Makes me feel better about myself. Well, that's exactly how I feel. Yes, I'm very smart. We're going to start with spirituality. With spirituality, I always like to say, I don't care if you believe in God, which is not really true. I don't care if you call it God. In order for the things that I like to talk about to have any resonance in your life, you got to believe in sunsets. You got to believe in rainbows. You got to have experience of connection with another human being and get some sense of awe from that. You know, what is important to me is that you have occasionally had that sense of, wow, there's something big, and wow, I'm also small. You know, so that bizarre contradiction that we live with and we kind of seek out in communities like this. We want more of that experience of that what we call divine in spaces like this. I don't care what you call it. I care that you want more of it. Because that's what we're talking about here. So when I'm talking about spirituality and God, if that's not your jam, hear it however you want to hear it. Okay? Spirituality, let me start off with a quote that many people in this room will be very familiar with. Don't take anything personally. Don Miguel Ruiz, who has a book called The Four Agreements, which is pretty foundational for many New Thought communities in terms of a guidebook of how to live your life in a way that's in alignment. Okay? And what I love about don't take anything personally in the context of compassion is if I'm taking things personally, I can't be compassionate. If I'm taking things personally, I can only look at you in the context of how you're going to impact me. So I can't bring you that deep sympathy or sorrow. I can't be sensitive to your misfortune. But if I can lean into this basic tenet of not taking things personally, feel my own unbreakableness, if I can lean into that, then I can see you as a person. Does that make sense? So this basic tenet that we're already working on in our spirituality is calling us to compassion, empowering us to compassion by helping us be set up for success when we don't take things personally. Marianne Williamson in A Return to Love, she often talks about calls to action. And she's like, people come up to me all the time expressing dismay over this thing in life or this thing in culture or what have you. And keep in mind, this is 30 years ago. You know, so I think it's still happening. You know, and she says, she always asks them what they're doing. What are you doing? I mean, it could be $5 a month you're giving to a cause you care about. What are you doing? She says, because I've noticed that people who participate in the solution to problems don't seem to find themselves as depressed about those problems as do people standing on the sidelines doing nothing. And this is my favorite part. She says, hope is born of participation in hopeful solutions. Hope is born of participation in hopeful solutions. Acts of compassion. That deep desire to alleviate suffering. And last but not least, in this section, the Course in Miracles says, love waits on welcome, not on time. Love waits on welcome, not on time. All the passions and dreams and concerns in your heart, God's not going, well, you better queue it up. It's going to take me 25, 30 years to fulfill that. No, it's ready. It's right there. And here's how it's right there. Is it right there that everything will change overnight? But no, it's not. But once you start creating, it is created. Once you start being, it is in the room. Life is happening through you, not to you. And the very act of changing begins the change. And therefore you are already experiencing the change. You understand? If I'm showing up with compassion, then suddenly the room is more compassionate. Through me. All of these things in your spirituality are a call to action, not just om-shu. It's a call to step out of that meditation space. See, I thought that was funny. This morning I got up and I was like, it's a call to action, not om-shu. That's hilarious. You're so funny. My girlfriend's shaking her head at home right now. But anyway, so let's move out of the spiritual space into the workspace. Is there a case for it? Are there people in corporate communities going, you know what, we need to bring more compassion, or is it just too woo-woo for them? Well, let's take a look. There's a guy who has a pretty successful grocery store, John McKay, the CEO of Whole Foods. You may have heard of it. And he says, we must bring love out of the corporate closet. We must bring love out of the corporate closet. And the reason I love that quote is he was defining compassionate management for himself. The reason I love that quote is not only are they successful as a company, they're successful as a culture. They're renowned for creating a culture that attracts and retains great employees in a space that has tremendous turnover. And to him, fundamental is bringing love out of the corporate closet. There's another guy, I love this one, I saw this in this book, Thrive, which is a wonderful book. I'm only a third of the way through, and I highly recommend it, by Marianne Huffington. It's not political, so if you're disinclined to Marianne Huffington's politics, this is about the workplace and thriving. And she quotes a gentleman from LinkedIn, CEO from LinkedIn, Jeff Weiner, who apparently coined the term managing compassionately, which is already interesting to me. But he lays out what does it look like to bring compassion to the workplace. And again, the workplace is your life. It's not just your office. And he says, when strongly disagreeing with another, most of us have a tendency to see things solely through our own worldview. Take it personally. In these circumstances, it can be constructive to take a minute to understand why the other person has reached the conclusion that they have. For instance, what in their background has led them to take that position? Are they fearful of a particular outcome that may not be obvious at a surface level? Asking yourself these questions, and more importantly, asking the other person these questions, can take what would otherwise be a challenging situation and transform it into a coachable moment and truly collaborative experience. Now, why don't I take up part of my 20 minutes to read that? The reason I did is because we have this narrative that we're feeding in our culture right now. We say it's coming through the media, whatever. No, you and I are feeding it all the time. We walk around going, it's so hard how polarized we are. It's such a shame how polarized we are. Do you think that polarization would change? Maybe, maybe. If when somebody I disagreed with, I said to them, in my head anyway, what in their background may have led them to this? What is the outcome they're afraid of that I'm not seeing? Because I have a strong desire to alleviate suffering, and in this moment they're suffering and fearful. So if I'm going to practice compassion, I can get there just with a little dash of curiosity, instead of just digging in to my side of the aisle. Practicing compassion. Last but not least, Janice Maturano. She's a woman who developed a very popular mindfulness program at General Mills, a very large corporation you may be familiar with. Probably has them for breakfast. And she has since gone on to develop the Institute for Mindful Leadership. She talks about mindfulness in particular, and that's of course a big thing in communities like this, developing that mindfulness. She says mindfulness is about training our minds to be more focused, to see with clarity, to have spaciousness for creativity, and to feel connected. She says that compassion to ourselves, to everyone around us, our colleagues, our customers, that's what the training of mindfulness is really about. There is no work-life balance. There is only one life. What's most important is that you be awake for it. I love that. Do what? There is no work-life balance. We have one life. What's most important is that you be awake for it. What I love about that is that she's putting a spotlight in a corporate context, saying this is critical to us being successful as a corporation, is that people develop this sense of awareness, this sense of compassion, this sense of empathy, this recognition that while it is true that I have to remember that work is not my life, I have to bring my life to work. I have to bring who I am to work. I have to make sure that I'm not building my values around my life, but I'm building my life around my values. Does that make sense? I think too often in workplaces we have a tendency to check our values at the door and say, yes sir, no ma'am, whatever we need to do there. We build our values around our life instead of being clear that that will not work. So there is an imperative within your spiritual life and a growing sense of an imperative in the corporate community, in the work world, that we need you to be showing up fully aligned with your values. And among them, one of the pillars being compassion, a deep sympathy and a sorrow when someone is in misfortune, a strong desire to alleviate that suffering. So let's put it to work. How do we do that? Well, let me ask you one of the oldest jokes in the book. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. Exactly. We have a tendency in communities like this to look at spirituality one of two ways. Either it's so big and so broad and I'm just trying to take it in, or I'm waiting for a holy moment of enlightenment and then everything will work. No, it's practice, practice, practice. That's the good news. It's tiny little bits of practice that develop the muscles that you need. I'll demonstrate it. We're going to do a little demonstration that we'll see if it works or not. But what I'm going to have you do is close your eyes. Don't worry, nothing weird's going to happen. I just want you to pantomime things with your hands, and I don't want you to be distracted by the person next to you while you're doing it. It will only take a minute. So we're going to close your eyes. I want you to imagine wherever you shower or bathe, and I want you to reach out, turn it on, and set it to the temperature you need. Perfect. Now I want you to imagine you're sitting on your couch and you want to watch TV. Reach over, pick up the remote, and turn on the TV. Hit the mute button. Awesome. Now the phone's ringing. Reach for your phone and turn it on. You know all those actions. You can open your eyes. Thank you for playing with me. You know all those actions, right? Like you're pretty clear. Oh, my shower knob comes out like that, and I turn it like that to get the right temperature. If I go that far, it's going to burn the crud off. Right? You know the remote. I mean, I know the remote. That's on, that's mute, that's last. You know where the things are. You didn't get there by divine knowledge. You got there by practice, by developing a habit around that. You Mr. Miyagi the crud out of that. You remember Karate Kid, the old one, not the more recent one. The old Karate Kid, when he was doing the waxing on and the waxing off and the washing and the sanding and everything, and he didn't realize all along he was learning to be an expert fighter. He was just developing the muscles that he needed to be ready for that. What we're talking about here is developing the spiritual muscles. This past week, and really in the past month, we've heard a lot of stories of heroism. And this past week especially, what was striking to me, when a lot of the first responders were being interviewed in Las Vegas, they were being given a lot of credit, for being heroes, appropriate credit for their response. And over I was hearing first responders, but I appreciate that, but we prepared for this. We practiced. We were ready. We weren't making it up as we went along. When you heard all the countless acts of everyday heroism, which always blows me away how the news is always very surprised about this. Is it surprising to you when people are good? It's not. It's surprising when people are bad. That's what surprises me. But maybe that's practice too. But it was amazing to me in so many of these stories, whether from the hurricanes or the Vegas, that you hear them, people interviewed afterwards, and friends and loved ones of the hero involved would be asked, did it surprise you that Joe was like that, or that Janet had done that, or what have you? And they'd be like, no, that's Janet. That's how she is, how she lives her life. It didn't surprise me that she was always going to run back in. Practice. Practice. So, what does it look like in your life? Well, let me ask you a question. When you go home and you want to eat dinner tonight, are you going to take the pot from the stove, put it on the table, and just start scooping it down, eating it up? Or are you going to set the table and eat it with utensils? You're going to set the table, right? You've got to set the table in your life. You've got to set the day in your life. When you get up in the morning's not starting until you had that cup of coffee. Well, is the morning starting before you had that cup of God? What are you doing in the morning? What are you doing to set your day? I'm going to throw some seeds out at you, just tell you a little bit about my morning routine very quickly. One of the first thing I do, I got from Reverend Carol, is that as soon as I wake up, no matter how I'm feeling, and it's often not so good, when I wake up in the morning, first thing I do is bing, 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 turn off the alarm. I wake in God, I wake in gratitude. I wake in God, I wake in gratitude. I woke up today. How cool is that? When my feet touch the ground, I say thank you. I'm setting a gratitude consciousness. I'm setting the table for the day. I'm making a point to meditate. Just like 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. I set a timer on my phone, which is somewhere over here. I set a timer on my phone. When the timer's done, I'm done. In that meditation, I'm opening myself up. I'm saying, thank you for this day. What is my assignment today? You know, I read some spiritual books, 3 to 5 minutes each. On the way to work, I'll do my manifesting work in the car. This is Atlanta, I'm gonna be in the car. You know, I do my manifesting work in the car. We're talking about 15 to 20 minutes tops in the morning, split up into little 3-minute, 4-minute chunks. I'm setting the day. I'm creating a context for me to be compassionate. I'm creating a context for me to be leaning into that God space, to be creating that room for elevating the rooms that I'm in. You see what I'm saying? And then when I walk into work, as I walk into work, this is a true story and an embarrassing one, but I try to get myself in the right headspace. So I have a little song I sing. I'll be like, I get to be love, 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 I get to be gratitude. And I'm singing this under my breath, I get to be love. Sometimes I change the genre around, sometimes it's like rock, sometimes it's a little country in there, you know, and then right before I go in the door, I notice something beautiful. Doesn't matter what it is. I notice something beautiful to remind me of the beauty in the world. So that I go into the workplace having set the table, having created the context, to be open, to be willing to not take things personally, to be willing to have great sympathy, to have great sorrow for anyone who's stricken by misfortune over the course of my day, to show up in that space, and then to keep it going throughout the day. It doesn't end. Those little positive things you see in your social media feeds, they're not just trite. They're getting you centered. They're getting you back to it. Reverend Beckwith, Agape, he also does something a lot when he's doing meditation, leading meditations. He periodically will check in and just go, notice your attention. Notice your attention. I started doing that in my own head. When I start to get caught up in the discomfort of the day, because it's got to be discomfort. It's got to be uncomfortable. That doesn't mean it's dysfunctional. It's just uncomfortable. Your workout's uncomfortable. Lots of things are uncomfortable that aren't wrong. But when I start to get caught up in that discomfort, notice my attention. Where is it? Let me get back to it. I'll give you one other tool, and then we're going to really apply this as we wrap up here. That there's another tool that I heard on an NPR show called Planet Money, and they were just doing a goofy one this time. They had a former spy on, and he was talking about how a former spy responds to a crisis. And he said, we have an acronym we work. It's DADA, D-A-D-A, and it stands for Data, Analysis, Decision, Action. Data, Analysis, Decision, Action. Data. My boss comes to me and is very upset because people are canceling our subscription service. He's very angry about this and very distressed about that. Well, I have deep sorrow and sympathy for that because he's clearly distraught in misfortune. So let me analyze that experience. Data analysis. All right, he's upset. Why is he upset? Because we're losing customers. Why would he be upset about losing customers? Well, he's afraid either we're not doing it right or the product's not right. And he's afraid for his job, he's afraid for my job, and he believes in what we're doing. All right, well that's interesting, and that helps me parse out the situation a little bit better. Decision. How can I act here? I could be defensive with him. I didn't do this, it's not my fault. Well, but is that going to alleviate suffering? I have a strong desire to alleviate suffering because I'm working to act out of compassion. Now, how would I approach it this way? You know what? Action. I hear that you're really upset. I get that. I'm upset about this too. How can we do this differently? Do you have ideas? You want me to come to you with some ideas? I think we can fix this. What do you want to do next? And then the next thing happens. If you apply it again, it's practice, practice, practice. We're creating a context for compassion. Because life is happening through you, not to you. And this spiritual life that you're seeking to create, it isn't going to happen in giant, shining light moment. It's going to happen a little bit of practice at a time. A little bit of building the spiritual muscles that you need at a time. In the same way you build the muscles you need in every other area of your life. You have to actively engage in building those spiritual muscles. And I hope, as we've been talking, that a few things have popped up that you're like, oh, I've been meaning to read that one book. I can take 2 minutes a day, 3 minutes a day to read a little bit of it and get a new idea in my head, a new thing in my heart. So when I walk into my office, I feel like I am feeding what I really want to grow. It's creating those muscles, because when you act in your world the way you want your world to be, which by the way is the only world you'll ever know, is your world. Doesn't matter how distressing the outside world is. The only world you ever experience is yours. That's it. That's your whole world. So if I make changes in my world, I am changing the world as I know it. If I show up compassionately in my world, then I am changing the world. That's how it's done. That's what they all said. The Jesuses and the Buddhas and all the ones, they all said that. You got to be it. And one way you can be it, which it turns out is improbably practical, is practicing compassion. By extending yourself a deep sorrow and sympathy when you're feeling misfortune, and extending to yourself a strong desire to alleviate that suffering by leaning into the things that you know alleviate it. And then coming from that place into the world. Because when you come from that place into the world, when you allow life to happen through you, when you practice that deep sympathy, that deep sorrow, that strong desire to alleviate suffering, when you practice bringing compassion to the world, as we like to say around here, and so it is, for real. That's how it's done. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.